There's a lot of play-by-play guys I really admire, and one of them is Ian Eagle. And if he were to describe National Signing Day yesterday, it would probably sound a little something like this. Dan Lanning delivers! Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with our beloved Ducks. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch this show. I appreciate everybody out there who has done so already, and all of you who continue to support the show. Thank you so much. Today's episode brought to you by Sling TV. Don't miss the Holiday Bowl between the Ducks and the Tar Heels of North Carolina right here on Sling. Sling, the TV you love for a price you'll love. Try it today. So, this is not my normal setup. As you may have figured out, I'm at the Marriott on the lower floor in Salt Lake City. Broadcaster's life, man, but nevertheless, doing my very best to bring you the best podcast I possibly can, which is made a little bit easier after the gem of a day that the Ducks had yesterday. I mean, outstanding. Outstanding. I don't know if, other than keeping Dante Moore, it could have gone that much better. But here's one thing I noticed. In this age of college football, it is almost impossible to stop your guys from getting flipped if you're a high-profile school. Go find me the program. Clemson might be it. Might be. That didn't have someone that they'd been looking at for a good amount of time or who had verbally committed flip away from their school. I mean, Bama had flips. LSU had flips. Oregon had flips. Washington had flips, or Washington got a flip. I think there was a Washington flip. I don't know. You just like go up and down. It's really, really common. And oh my gosh, Oregon did so well. And I want to start with Dan Lanning, because when he was hired as Oregon's head coach, I think what we all saw was a young up-and-comer, a guy who had put together one of the greatest defenses in the history of college football, who had no head coaching experience. But we looked at the players who they had on that side of the ball and said, goodness gracious, that was a lot of really high-level players. Yeah, the scheme is really good, but man, they're just some beasts. They got the number one pick in the draft. They got Jalen Carter in there. They got Keely Ringo. They got Nakobe Dean. I mean, I know a bunch of those players because they were, first-round picks or will be, and they were recruited and coached by Dan Lanning. And so when you hire someone of that caliber as a coordinator, your expectation as a fan base to see him as a successful head coach is, well, you may not be able to bring in that level of players across the board, but you should be able to recruit at a high level. And we'd seen glimpses of it, right? He took over, and the program's recruiting class after Cristobal left was down in like the 50s. He salvaged it all the way up to the top 25. Think about how great of a National Signing Day Dan Lanning and the Ducks just had. You lost one of the 10 best players in the country, one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the country by consensus, depending on where you looked, and still you turn around, and through the first signing window, Oregon is a top 10 recruiting class. I mean, are you kidding me? And this is Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi as well, delivering on the promises that I won't say we've been sold, but that we've come to expect. When you bring in coaches with that sort of track record, when you bring in coaches who have brought in the players, the likes of which Lupoi and Lanning have in their college coaching careers, you expect that they're going to be able to do that at Oregon, which just had its recruiting profile elevated higher than any of us had ever seen in the program's history. Now a program, previously a program. And it's intensely satisfying and encouraging, I think, to see these results this early in the tenure, despite the disappointing end of the regular season. Because oftentimes results matter for recruiting, but they're not everything. You can still be a really good recruiter and not have the greatest results that you're maybe hoping for. I don't think you can be a disaster on the field, but Miami just went 5-7 and they're recruiting at a high level because Mario's very good at it, as we know. But Lanning and Lupoi delivered in a big way here. I mean, a big, big way. And it's so great to see that taking place early in Dan Lanning's tenure. He's never been a head coach before. He's never had to be the lead guy who makes the final decisions, who orchestrates the personnel and the staff and the players and everything. And these are the results. Encouraging in terms of what it means going forward would be an understatement. Because I'll be straight with you guys. I did not feel great about where Oregon's recruiting was going into National Signing Day yesterday, because I looked at losing Dante Moore and was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen there. You going to be able to even get a high school quarterback this cycle, or are you just going to go to the portal? No, they ended up getting a quarterback. All the recruiting buzz had been, yeah, all those 5-star defensive lineman edge prospects you're going for, yeah, not looking like they're in great a spot. USC's in the lead for Mateo, and David Hicks probably A&M, and Mpemba's fallen out of the mix entirely here. And they delivered. They delivered in a big way. And I don't know if Dan Lanning has slept in the last 72 hours. I honestly can't foresee how he would have slept at this point in time. But whatever he's done is working. And we saw the results yesterday. And is recruiting everything? No. But is it the lifeblood of your program? Yeah, a little bit. Because a lot of these guys are not going to be major players. Some will, some won't. It can be kind of hard to tell. No, you have an inclination on some. You look at Mateo, I think you can pretty easily see. I think we got an impact player right there. Jurion Dickey. That looks like an instant impact sort of guy. But when Oregon's class was, made up of verbal commitments, and it was Dante Moore, it was Jurion Dickey, and then it was Caleb Presley, and then Kenyon Sadiq has been a riser, and you have, Terrence Green in there, and Amari Washington, and Cole Martin, Demetrius Martin's son, a lot of guys who have been on there for quite some time. You didn't know, because how could you have known, frankly? I don't think anybody could have known. The amount of craziness and just unexpected changes that took place yesterday, bonkers, man. I was texting my guy, John Garcia, our recruiting insider here at the Locked On Network. And I said, man, I didn't see that coming. He goes, dude, I don't even know anymore. I asked him another question. So could this really happen? Dude, I don't even know anymore. It's wild. It's crazy. It feels like there were a lot more big name recruit flips on signing day, or very close to signing day, than there have been in years past. I mean, Travis Hunter flipping to Jackson State last year was an anomaly. Now it feels like that's going to happen every year. And he did commit to Colorado. It's a wild world. But Oregon is navigating their way through it. And you can bet that this is the recruiting standard and expectation that they have going forward. You can't bet that at BetOnline, but you can find just about everything else because it's your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the recently finished World Cup. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. I was just so happy. After losing Dante on Monday, I said, well, maybe it'll just kind of be an okay kind of top 15 recruiting class like the chip classes. Nothing special, a couple good players. We'll just kind of see if a couple can pan out, maybe surpass expectations. But the only people that have surpassed expectations to this point are Dan Lanning and his staff. And you got to give everybody credit. Junior Adams, the wide receiver coach, got Jurion Dickey signed. Marshall Malkow, director of player personnel, essentially the general manager, working behind the scenes. Will Stein, offensive coordinator, getting in touch with the offensive recruits, and other than Dante Moore, keeping them all committed. Dowdell signed, Cozart signed, Dickey signed. It's just a really good place to be for Oregon on the recruiting trail. A really, really good place to be. And it, of course, starts with Dan the Man Lanning right at the top, running the program. And I did not foresee this class jumping all the way well inside the top 10. I thought top 10 be a lofty goal, but if he just kept it inside the top 15, I was going to be happy with that. But then you come in with the Matayo Uiagalelei commitment. Talk about making a splash. He had been trending. All the information everybody had heard. And it looked like Oregon was third to USC and Ohio State. And there come the Ducks. What was the final factor? What pushed him over the edge? I don't know. I haven't talked to the kid. Here's what I do know. He's going to be an Oregon Duck. And he is now the prized recruit of this class at a position of need. The potential to be, more so than any other player, an instant impact guy. I think he and Dickey are the most likely. But you pull that rabbit out of the hat. And then once you're showing the crowd that little white rabbit, like, oh, yeah, here. Look what I pulled out of the hat here. Oh, what's this down here? It's a Kyle Bowen. Now, as I am recording this, he has not signed his NLI. We'll see how that plays out. Hopefully it works in our favor. But they flipped a cornerback from LSU, Dalen Austin, who, by the way, is Alex Austin's brother, safety for Oregon State, really good player. Brothers, they're not always the same. They're usually pretty similar. And you lost Caleb Presley to Washington, but you flipped Dalen Austin from LSU. Take that. Is it the ideal scenario? Not necessarily. I think Presley is the number one player in the state of Washington for a reason, but we know one member of that Austin family knows how to play in the secondary at a high level, and you know what Oregon needs going into next year? Bodies at that position. And I think this recruiting class as a whole reflects something that may seem simple, but is overall, for the most part, very smart from Dan Lanning and the staff, that they are going after what Oregon needs. I mean, it's also kind of satisfying for us as fans to watch these moves take place, because we see where the weaknesses are. Defensive line, secondary, going to need an offensive lineman or two. Yeah, they got a couple of those too. Talk about them in a moment. And then Lanning and the staff see the exact same things. Hey, you don't need a million linebackers, but you might need a starting caliber one, Justin Jacobs. Hey, you don't have a lot of proven bodies at receiver, Trayshawn Holden. Hey, you might need to have a lot of bodies in the secondary. Well, we're losing Caleb Presley. We got Cole Martin coming in. Okay. We got Jalil Florence there. Jalil Tucker redshirted last year. A lot of guys there. But let's just go get Dalen Austin. Let's just go do that. The defensive line, an unquestioned weakness for Oregon over the course of this year. When their defense got exploited, particularly against Washington, yeah, the secondary had some bad moments. You know who else was even worse? The defensive line. And go look at this class. Blake Purchase, Tatum Tuioti, Terrence Green, Amari Washington, Tavita Pamee. Just names, bodies up and down, and then the wonderful, beautiful, flashy, shiny cherry on top. Matayo Uiagalelei. Does that mean his brother is coming? I doubt it. I don't see why DJU would come to Oregon. Oregon State honestly makes a lot of sense. I mean, like a lot of sense for DJU. I talked about that on yesterday's episode of Locked On Pac-12 if you want to go check that out. DJU to Oregon State makes a lot of sense. But to Oregon, not so much with his brother there. Or even with his brother there, I should say. Because, oh yeah, they added a quarterback too. And it's not some let's just get a body at quarterback sort of guy. I don't know what Austin Novosad brings to the table. Here's what I do know about him. He was the highest rated quarterback commit in Baylor history, and Oregon just went in and said, let's flip. And they flipped him. And now he's a Duck. So now you get a guy who's a top 10 or 12 quarterback in the 2023 class after you lose a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the cycle. And then you end up with more 5 stars than you had on Monday when we all rolled out of bed. I just don't know how much better the day could have gone other than perhaps Kyle Bowen actually signing his national letter of intent. But if he puts pen to paper and you bring in a 5-star safety in addition to Cody DeCambra and Tyler Turner, you got Trajan Williams, another 4-star safety in that room. You may not have a ton of experience. I think that's why they brought in Kyrie Jackson. But you may not have a ton of experience in that secondary. But boy, it sure looks like you're going to have some talent that they can work with and develop. And speaking of develop, the offensive line is going to be a legitimate question going into next year, but we are seeing those chess pieces get moved around in a great way for Oregon. Big time commitments on the offensive line. Adrian Clem, the man, the myth, the legend. I think it's a fair question to ask at this point in time. Can Adrian Clem recruit and develop his own college offensive line at a high level? Here's what we do know about him right now. He's gotten a lot of high-level offensive lineman commits. And the offensive line, statistically, was even better than they were a year ago. But it's different when you have guys who are learning versus guys who have already learned a lot and maybe just need a little bit of coaching here and there, work within the scheme of the offense, all that sort of stuff. It's different. But Adrian Clem had a really good day yesterday. Ajani Cornelius and Junior Angelau are both 6'4" or above, 300 pounds and above. Now, Angelau played at Texas. He was hurt this year, but he was supposed to be a really good player. Cornelius, meanwhile, was one of the fastest rising recruits at the FCS level. And he was between Oregon, Tennessee, Nebraska, and Ohio State. And he went with the Ducks. And I think that bodes well for Adrian Clem's recruiting prowess and for the sort of offensive line that Oregon can build going forward with him as our offensive line coach. Really, really encouraged by that. And as you look at the bodies who are still there going into next year, you still have some talented guys from the last recruiting cycle. Kawika Rogers is in there. Davey Uli is in there, who we haven't seen a lot of, right? But they're certainly going to be in the mix. But right now, if everybody graduated, like let's say the Holiday Bowl ended in this very moment, who's Oregon's offensive line? Jackson Powers Johnson is going to start somewhere. I don't know where. I really don't. We can talk about that all offseason and whatnot. Marcus Harper will be in there. Maybe Stephen Jones comes back. Maybe. Josh Connerly. Questions. And you need more than 5 offensive linemen who you feel capable with regards to or who you feel are capable to start and give you a high-level performance because of what we've seen the last couple of years. I talked about him earlier this week, Dawson Jaramillo. How often did he play last year? Yeah, quite a bit. Not as much this year, right? They liked other guys more. I think that's okay. Dawson's not the biggest guy out there, but he's solid. But Stephen Jones wasn't healthy all this year, and Ryan Walk wasn't always healthy, and Alex Forsyth wasn't always healthy. So you need like 7, maybe 8 guys who you can put in and at the very least not have a significant drop-off from your top 5. And those 2 guys, someone who's played a lot at the FCS level, sure, but has the size and has got the potential to make that adjustment in an instant, and a guy who was at a legitimate Power 5 school and was very good over there, Yeah, those are guys that you want to be bringing in. Big time commitments there. The one that I found curious, and I think I've honestly, as I record this, and I prefer doing the show at one take, it feels more genuine. I don't think I properly communicated to all of you how freaking jacked I was when Matayo committed. That's massive. And I was going to be disappointed. I said all throughout this recruiting process, as I brought on John Garcia and we talked about, the 3 5-star defensive lineman Oregon was looking at. Samuel Mpemba fell out towards the end. David Hicks, Matayo U. I said, look at this staff. Tosh Lupoi, defensive line coach in the NFL. That's his specialty. Has had some questionable times this year as a defensive play caller. Is still making a lot of money. So you got to bring it on the recruiting trail. Well, he's bringing it right now. He is bringing it right now, and so is Lanning. And when you bring in that caliber of coach, you should have an expectation as a Duck fan to get those sorts of guys. And they delivered. And it didn't even look like they were going to be able to, and then they did. This staff is doing a phenomenal job on the recruiting trail. And that is an instant impact kind of guy who can make improvements to your defense in year one. And you don't find a lot of those at the high school ranks. You really don't on either side of the ball. Matayo is that sort of guy. And that's the sort of guy Oregon needs to bring in if they want to get to a college football playoff with Dan Lanning at the helm. You need to have those sorts of players. And Oregon's got them. That is a big, big time get. Man, that one fired me up. The one that I found curious, and I'm not knocking the kid or anything like that. By all accounts, looks like he could be a really good player. I found the Jaden Lamar edition interesting. The running back brings a lot of things to the table, but just from a positional standpoint, I was curious. I was curious, shall we say. I don't think he signed his NLI as I'm recording this. National Letter of Intent, not name, image, and likeness. But with Dowdle signing, and then you've got Whittington and Irving, and you've got Jordan James, I just look at that and was going, with the number crunching you got to do on the scholarship side of things, found that one to be interesting that you'd go after another running back. Because I really don't think we need that. Maybe he carves out a role. Maybe he's better than all. I don't know. That was the one that stood out to me of like, really? Kind of seems like we were set at that position. But attrition, competition, never hurts to have depth. But I wonder what that means for other guys going forward. Something to watch. Finally, yesterday was such a crazy day. I needed to wait for the right time to pull out this question. And this is just a fun one. My guy, Balin Strand. Bonus question. Which of these foods do you prefer? Tacos versus burritos? Tacos all day. Burritos, I think, have kind of fallen out of favor a little bit because tortilla feels like unnecessary calories, and it just kind of, not that burritos aren't great. They certainly can be. I've had both within the last year, but you find really good, authentic Mexican street tacos. I'll take tacos over burritos. Spaghetti versus lasagna. Spaghetti. My mom made killer spaghetti growing up. Absolute dynamite. Coke versus Pepsi. Answer, neither. I don't drink soda. Only things I drink, water, lemonade, Arnold Palmer's, tea, and milk. I have a glass of milk with dinner almost every night. Just kind of always have. Snickers versus Milky Way. Snickers all day. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups versus Shapes. Like trees, footballs, eggs, and such. I actually like the Shapes. And I didn't always used to like Reese's. I didn't like peanut butter growing up. Now I love peanut butter, and I eat it like almost every day. My go-to breakfast in the morning, oatmeal and peanut butter. Just kind of gets the fuel going, But I like the Shapes. I really, really do. Both excellent options, though. The other ones I feel more strongly about than the Reese's for sure. But I feel strongly about how great this National Signing Day was for Oregon. There's still another one. We could add more players. More players will leave. Of course, we'll continue to monitor all of that. Appreciate you bearing with me in this unique setup, shall we say. Appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Great day to be a Duck. Go Ducks.